Hola amigos, los invito a ver la nueva película de Disney Pixar, no se la vayan a perder.
Es un evento muy peculiar y muy importante para The Walt Disney Company, ya que hoy vamos a compartir con ustedes algunas novedades de la película COCO. Bueno, como bien saben, COCO se estrena en México en todos los cines el 27 de octubre. Los niños no tienen clases, así que yo les recomiendo que de una vez vayan pidiendo sus boletos para que tengan un buen lugar. Aunque ya la mayoría vio la película. ¿Quién ya vio la película? ¿Quién lloró? Muy bien. Bueno, pues los que ya vieron la película no me dejarán mentir que es una obra de arte llena de valores, llena de colorido, con un toque muy especial, la música, el doblaje. La verdad es que nosotros le agradecemos mucho a nuestros amigos de Pixar que hayan hecho el detalle de la investigación y que hayan cuidado todas nuestras tradiciones, nuestras costumbres, nuestros valores, y estamos muy contentos. La verdad es que es algo que esté pasando mucho a México. Viene en un momento también que necesitamos, ¿no? Nosotros como mexicanos abrazarnos, y yo creo que esta película viene a complementar muy bien todo lo que hoy estamos viviendo. Así que, pues muchísimas gracias a nuestros amigos de la prensa que siempre nos están acompañando por todos los eventos. Algunos nos vimos en Morelia, como bien saben, en Morelia abrimos el 15º Festival de Morelia con COCO. Es la primera vez en 15 años que el festival abre con una película animada. Entonces también estamos muy agradecidos y muy orgullosos de poder haber sido parte de este viaje con ellos, y creo que los resultados fueron muy buenos. El día de hoy tenemos una avant premiere en el Palacio de Bellas Artes, que también es un honor y un privilegio estar en un recinto tan importante como lo que es Bellas Artes. Parte de la taquilla será donada al SECAM. Entonces también estamos haciendo muchísimas actividades en torno a COCO, ¿no? Yo creo que también ya vieron por la calle, por las avenidas principales de México, toda la publicidad, toda la campaña que tenemos. Entonces, pues muy contentos, muy emocionados, y esperemos que esta película haga historia en México y que ustedes también sean parte de esta historia. Y bueno, el día de hoy vamos a tener una conferencia de prensa, preguntas y respuestas con los directores, con la productora de la película, y posteriormente, cuando terminemos, nos dan un minutito para separar la mesa y haremos un photocall con los directores para que ustedes tengan las mejores tomas fotográficas. Así que bueno, pueden hacer la pregunta en inglés o en español, como ustedes se sientan cómodos. Tienen traductor, ustedes también, en caso que lo lleguen a necesitar.
You know, we can only speak to animation because at Pixar that's the medium that we work in. But this film in particular, you know, I think we all embraced it as a real opportunity to feature the talent that is in the Latino community, both from the standpoint of the actors and actresses who do an incredible job bringing this film to life, and also, you know, behind the camera. We worked a lot with artists from Mexico, Mexican-American or Latino backgrounds, to design the characters, to design the world, to build these worlds in the computer. In addition to teaming up with cultural consultants, because as we're developing the story, you know, at Pixar we are we've had a lot of practice kind of cracking story problems and developing narratives, but we really needed to depend on, you know, the experts in the field of Mexican culture. You know, I'm Mexican-American myself, but I can't say that I'm an expert in, you know, Mexican history or Mexican music, but with our consultants, we're able to find those resources and really say, in this story, what can we go to show off the beauty, show off the things that are really deeply rooted in the culture, and do a just representation on screen.
To the last part of your question, when we first decided to make this film and tell a story set against this very real culture, we knew immediately that we had a huge responsibility to be accurate, to be respectful, and to never lapse into cliche or stereotype. And from day one, 6 years ago, we spent every single day doing everything we can to ensure that, that we don't do that.
Perdón, por favor.
Hi, I'm Johnny Carbona. I'm just a single boy with a dream, a huge Disney fan. Speaking about the accuracy of Mexican culture, sometimes for a lot of people, me included, Frida Kahlo is overrated. So I love the way in the movies portrayed it, because all the scene about the papaya and stuff, I was laughing because it's very accurate about being overrated. How do you feel about like working with this huge, not only Mexican, but like global culture icon like Frida Kahlo?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would want to attribute, you know, understanding that Frida Kahlo is a huge icon, and as such, people have very strong feelings about her. What we really wanted to lean into in this film, especially in the context of Miguel, who is this artist who doesn't really have, he's got this passion, he's got this talent, but he doesn't necessarily know the pathway to pursuing it. And we thought, in this realm where you have the opportunity to meet all of the people who came before you, all of the artists who came before you, we thought that this is a perfect opportunity to give Miguel examples of people who use their art to affect the world around them. Amongst them, you know, our Frida Kahlo, you've got, you know, Jorge Negrete and Pedro Infante, and chief among them for our story is this fictional character, Ernesto de la Cruz, and we just thought there's such a breadth of incredible Mexican talent from history that we wanted to lean into it in a lighthearted way, to just really explore what it means to use your talent to change the world, and hopefully people find it engaging and entertaining.
And I love that throughout this film we have these strong, unique, complicated, iconoclastic women throughout the film, and Frida's one of them for me. And I think that is just a great, wonderful, beautiful thread that runs throughout COCO.
Hola, Eduardo González, el Grupo Asir, bienvenidos a México. Siempre que hacen este tipo de películas animadas, en Pixar, en Disney, son como muy cuidadosos de no hacerlas muy, digamos, muy locales. Aquí es una película totalmente mexicana, pero ¿qué encontraron para poder exportar a otros países, para que la conciban también igual que nosotros la estamos viendo, con ese amor, ¿no?, que están expresando por ser nuestra cultura, pero que en otros países también lo puedan concebir así? It's certainly something we thought about when we first decided to make the film. You know, it was a very culturally specific film. We had never done a culturally specific film at Pixar before. But early on, as we researched Dia de Muertos and really grew to appreciate and understand the depths of the traditions, it became clear to us how important family, the idea of family, was to the celebration. And the more we understood how important family was, and the notion of the obligation that we have to remember our loved ones and pass along their stories to the next generation, and to make sure that they're never forgotten, we realized that that's a universal idea. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, we all have family. We all go through the ups and downs of dealing with our families, and so family is the center of the story that we're telling in COCO. So while, yes, the subject matter is culturally specific, the ideas are universal. And as we've begun to show the film around the world, it's become clear to us that people not only relate to the film because of those ideas of family, but we have found that there also is a great interest in learning about Mexican culture and appreciation for everything that they do learn by watching the film and learning about what Dia de los Muertos is all about.
I think one of the most telling things as I've been working on this film is at Pixar, we're a diverse studio and that we're a lot of artists and a lot of technical folk who come from many different countries, many different backgrounds. And in our very first screening, these films kind of develop over the course of years, but even in our very first screening, a lot of the elements that ended up in the final film were there. And seeing how the studio in its diversity was affected by the story, you could tell that as people in different departments were working on this film, they were putting an extra bit of effort, an extra bit of heart, an extra bit of work into everything that they were doing. And we began to discover, as people emailed us within the studio, that a lot of people at the studio were doing it because it meant something to a relationship that they had. You know, it meant something to someone they loved, just working on this film that was about family, about remembrance. And a lot of them took it personally. And that was very telling to me that this was a story that had the power to affect anybody from any place. And I think you can see, think you can see how much heart all of the artists put into it because of that.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buen día. Mi nombre es Doña del Video de Espectador. Primero felicitarlos por la gran película, la verdad es que es un gran resultado para nosotros como mexicanos, es un gran orgullo. Mi pregunta iría directamente hacia los niños. Yo sé que esta película es para todo el público en general, pero quisiera saber, ustedes, ¿cuál creen que sería el mensaje que los niños recibirían hoy en día? Porque las tradiciones y las costumbres mexicanas se están olvidando cada día un poco más en las nuevas generaciones. ¿Cuál es la respuesta que ustedes creen que los niños y estas nuevas generaciones tengan con respecto a esta película?
I think, yeah, that's one of the things that I think is particularly special about this film is this idea of the traditions being passed down generation to generation. And the fact that our main character is of the youngest generation, and he doesn't necessarily rebel against the traditions of Dia de Muertos, but he does rebel against this tradition of no music. And I think that kind of can sit as a surrogate of a situation where when you know you live in a multi-generational household, sometimes maybe you don't understand or appreciate when you're young the value of the traditions of your family or the value of that connection between generations. And so my hope is that when families go to see this film together, they have a way to communicate the meaning and the value and the tradition of these things that you pass on generation to generation, the stories, you know, of people who came before you. One of the interesting things that we saw when we came to do research is the fact that Dia de Muertos means something different depending on where you are in life. When you're a kid, you know, oftentimes you see kids in the cemetery and they're really bored and they don't know what to do with themselves and they're fidgeting. But as you grow older, as you become a parent, I'm sure as you become a grandparent or a great-grandparent, your relationship to those stories and to those people on the ofrenda and to the idea of passing down those traditions changes and becomes richer. And I think that comes from the responsibility of families to pass down those traditions.
On a side note, I just noticed all these years at Pixar, Adrian Molina, I've been there 25 years and been there since Toy Story, and always noticed how, it's my observation that we have these very kind of old-fashioned stories in a way and old-fashioned values juxtaposed against this very cutting-edge technology, which I just really love that, and I've always thought about these films kind of as in an interesting way, kind of like the grandparents telling stories to the children, and that's just kind of one of my observations over the years.
De este lado, Alejandra Sánchez. Me gustaría saber qué tan cierto es que en un principio quería ponerle a la película Día de Muertos y pues finalmente se terminó llamando COCO. ¿Por qué fue?
What happened was very early on in the making of the film, oftentimes we don't have a title for a very long time, or we'll just work with a code name for the title. And this was very early on in the first year of making the movie. One of the ideas that was kicked around was to name the film Dia de los Muertos. And so as a result, we filed some paperwork to register that title, as you always do when you have a title for a film. And in this case, that proved to be a mistake that we didn't anticipate and that we regret and we apologize for. It was never our intention to try to trademark the holiday itself. It was always just about the title. That being said, it was painful for all of us that happened, and we felt terrible about it because, as I mentioned earlier, from the very beginning of this project, we tried to do everything we can to be respectful and to be, authentic in the story that we were telling. And of course, that ended up sending the complete opposite message that we were trying to send. But we did try to correct it as quickly as possible and apologize for what happened. And we ultimately moved on to what became, of course, our actual title, which is COCO.
I think if anything good came out of that experience, it was just the fact that having worked with Lee and Darla and seeing the care that they were taking in the very early stages to be respectful, it only allowed the conversation about how much we needed to communicate with each other, with the broader company, and just be very, very thoughtful in all avenues about making a film like this about a real culture, about a real celebration, and that helped us to just really open up the doors to conversation with our cultural consultants, with everyone at the studio about how do we take care to make sure that this is done completely respectfully.
And that every decision was made with sensitivity, and yeah, it's been great, and everyone has been on board with seeing things the way we think to see them.
Gracias.
Hi, I'm Regina Tiscareño from Radio Tinsburg. First of all, congratulations, it's an excellent movie. And okay, what is the reason and how was the process of making a Mexican movie that talks about our traditions?
Well, hopefully we've made it clear how important it was for us to, of course, be respectful. For me, for all of us, when we first came down to Mexico, and then for all the subsequent research trips that we came on, when we traveled all over the country, we were in Morelia, and Lake Pátzcuaro, and Oaxaca, Guanajuato, many different places. We tried to absorb as much of the culture as we could to have it infuse itself into the film that we were making. But the most important part of those trips for us was the time that we spent with families. I requested before we even left on those trips that they arrange for us to embed ourselves with different families of different backgrounds all over the country so that we could spend time with them just observing their day-to-day life. And then during Dia de Muertos, having those families share their traditions with us, feed us, walk us to the town cemeteries, proudly show us their family cemetery plots, tell us about their own families. And we did that again and again and again. Since we knew Miguel was going to be from a family of shoemakers, we visited families of shoemakers. We visited families that have all kinds of different livelihoods, making papel picado, making mezcal, making mole, alebrijes. And all that time that we spent slowly made its way into the film, not just visually, but in the story that we ended up telling.
From a personal standpoint, it was also, really, really exciting to me to be able to tell a story that was based on the Mexican culture. Every film that you make, it kind of becomes a master's degree in whatever working on, and as story artists.
I know a lot about cars.
As story artists, as directors and producers, we're on this film for 4 years, and sometimes upwards of that. And so to be able to work on this film and kind of be steeped in my culture, call up my parents, ask about family stories, and find that the familial connection to a Pixar film, that's deeper than I've ever been able to go. And I think it helps to create a story that's unique for the studio, that is unique for the world, but for just strictly from a personal standpoint, I felt like, I'm very thankful for it because it's helped me to grow, to reconnect with my roots, and to create something that I'm very proud to share with my family in the United States and Mexico and beyond.
Hi, my name is Victor Vasquez from Comunicarla. Welcome to Mexico. First of all, this is a beautiful movie. You have a great movie to show the world. But well, we know to make this movie, it was necessary a lot of investigation for a long time for the culture here in Mexico. But what kind of things is the most important for you in your personal experience of that investigation? What kind of things do you learn about all of this investigation for?
I mean, I think the most important thing for us, like Lee mentioned earlier, is the families, really. Is the people and all the people that we met and all the stories that they told and all the things that happened when we were hanging out with the families. All those tiny little details, little anecdotes for our whole team, all of the artists that were with all of these amazing, warm, generous, kind, and super fun families. All those tiny little details made its way into the film. And then, just traveling throughout this country and being so inspired by the beauty of the country and the architecture and the details, and trying to represent that in our film. All of those things we hope made a beautiful movie.
I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in a generation that saw Toy Story and Toy Story 2 in the theaters, and you wouldn't believe how many college students, when I got to college, still had their favorite toys because all of a sudden they felt guilty about throwing them away. Because, it's a film that really narrows in on this relationship between your childhood and what these symbols mean. And I think for this film, what I've walked away with, having experienced the storytelling, the celebration, the family, I think it's going to do the exact same thing for people, but with their families and with their family stories. And I think when people finish watching this film, they're going to think, I need to be a good steward of my history, and I need to know the stories of the people who came before me because it matters. And that's what's so beautiful about Dia de Muertos is it's about this responsibility to be keepers of those memories.
One of the most impactful things that we learned that I don't think any of us knew before we went into this project, we learned about this notion of all of us being capable of dying multiple deaths. And we learned this from several people who taught us about the rich traditions of Dia de Muertos. We learned that we die the first time when our hearts stop. And we learned that we die kind of a second time when we're buried, when nobody can see us any longer. But then we learned that we're all capable of dying this third and final death when there's nobody left in the living world who remembers us. There's nobody left who knew us, who could pass down our stories. And that, to us, had just an enormous impact. It was just such a powerful notion that we knew we needed to make it part of our film. And that notion, for those of you who haven't seen the film yet, is part of the bedrock of the story that we tell. And personally, for all of us, it's made us think, and it's given a lot more urgency to us to make sure that our loved ones are remembered. I have photo albums full of people that I don't really know, And I know that my parents know them, and that if I don't take the time to talk to them about those people and get their stories, that when my parents are no longer here, those people will all be forgotten. And so, as Adrian said, we're really hoping that people who see this film are ignited with a new urgency to learn their family stories and pass it along.
Hi, morning.
John Lasseter has been for a number of years as well, and we actually build a large ofrenda at Pixar for the second year now. We've built an enormous ofrenda in the lobby of Pixar, and we've invited everyone in the company to bring in photos of their loved ones to place atop the ofrenda. So it definitely has become a part of the culture at Pixar. What was the first part of your question? Oh, how do we see the dead now?
For me, you know, it really is, me and the Much Post, it's this celebration that comes around once a year. But like I said, we've been working on this film. You guys have been on it for 6 years. I've been on it for 4.5 years. And so we've kind of been living in this realm every day. It's been really good for me just in terms of recognizing the fact that that connection with the people you loved doesn't end at death. That you know, however you look at it, whatever you believe, just the very fact that you hold their stories in your heart and you keep the meaning that they had in your life close to you is, in a sense, them living on. And so that's been something that's been very helpful for me, just in terms of thinking about that relationship in a way that is everlasting.
We're very grateful for this optimistic view about the celebration of life, family reunion, and connection. We're very grateful to have been living in this world for the last several years, and so we thank you for that.
I was very close to my grandmother growing up, and she was always very supportive of my creative aspirations. She was always the one to drive me long distances for play rehearsals, to take me to art lessons. It was, you know, my grandma did everything she could because my mother was working. And unfortunately, she passed away while I was making the first Toy Story film, so she never got to see anything that I've done creatively and professionally in my life. And despite that, I've always felt that she's here with me, and anytime I've hit a milestone in my career, I felt that she's there with me. When I won an Academy Award, I looked up and thanked her at that moment. And so, diving into this world, diving into these traditions of Dia de los Muertos really have cemented for me that notion that my grandmother is coming back. She is seeing what I'm doing with my life. I do still feel her love.
Hola, buenos días. Lucero Calderón del periódico Ciencia. Tengo dos preguntas que me quieran responder. Una es si, con base en toda esta investigación que realizaron, todo lo que aprendieron, lo que ya han integrado a su vida, ¿consideran que este tipo de tradición de Día de Muertos puede unir naciones, o pueden unir seres humanos, o dos países tan diversos y a la vez tan comunes como, y tan cercanos como Estados Unidos, México? Y la segunda, ¿qué opinión tienen acerca de presentar el día de hoy COCO en Bellas Artes, que es un recinto pues bueno, muy importante en México, y eso de ayudar obviamente a los niños, jóvenes que toman clases de música en esta región de Oaxaca, ayudarles con instrumentos? ¿Por qué decidieron hacerlo de esta manera? ¿Por qué a ellos? ¿Por qué con instrumentos? En fin, gracias.
Well, we could answer the second part first and then go back around. We have got better memories. To answer the second part of the question, we are so honored to be able to premiere the film at Palacio de Bellas Artes. It's such a prestigious institution, and to be able I think it's such a wonderful way to celebrate, you know, all the things we have learned, to celebrate the art and the culture, well, I'm remembering the first part of the question, and as this way to just represent to the world the beauty of the celebration that comes from Mexico. all of our hope is, you know, at Pixar we always seek to make a film that has the ability to touch people all across the world, and I think there's something to be really proud about here in Mexico, the fact that this is a tradition that is meant to unite people and to reunite people. And I hope that the spirit of it is embraced by the world, is embraced by neighbors, is embraced by families. Yes.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I've always felt that the quickest way to kind of break down barriers, walls between us, is to tell stories. And tell stories that engender empathy for the characters in the story. When we empathize with characters, we stop thinking of them as being different than ourselves, and we start to see them as being like ourselves. And you know, we hope that by telling this story that hopefully people empathize with, they will just see this as a universal story and not you know, telling a story about someone any different than themselves.
And we're super excited about being at Bellas, very honored, extraordinarily honored and very excited to be at Bellas Artes. Everybody, when we first started this film, you know, this is a dream come true for all of the community at Pixar and our cultural consultants. Everybody was hoping that this might be the outcome, and here we are today, to bring it to Mexico first and to show it and premiere it at Bellas Artes. Like, that is, we're so very excited about that.
And in addition to that, you asked about the donations to the CECAM, and I don't want it to be lost in any of these discussions how important music is to the culture, to this film, to us as human beings, and we really, you know, we really want this film, in addition to connecting people to their families, to inspire them to embrace the power of music, and especially in this culture, especially with young people. There is so much good that music does for the world. There's so much good that music does for communication, for collaboration. Even on this film, the talented musicians that we've been able to bring together from different regions, different countries, to talk about, you know, music is culture, music is life, music is expression, and so we're very honored, and we can't think of a better cause to support than children learning to play music, because it's a skill that that lasts for a lifetime, and it's so foundational. So we're very honored to be able to help in that capacity.
Hi guys, let me congratulate you again for COCO. I'm not Mexican, I'm Peruvian, but I couldn't be more proud of this year as a Latin American. So given how people have embraced this movie, can we expect more cultural films like this one?
One of the great things about Pixar is that there's not some pool of story ideas being developed and then assigned to people. Every story that's ever been told at Pixar is because a director followed a passion or an interest and pursued a story that they wanted to tell, and the studio supports that. So in the case of COCO, you know, it was originally my idea to tell a story set against Dia de Muertos, and the studio, both Pixar and Disney, supported that. So future stories could come from anywhere, I guess is all I can say. You know, we all follow our interests, we all travel the world, and you never know where you know, that motivation or that spark of an idea will come from. So we're open to all ideas.
Sandra Cicle, Canal 11. En la historia de Disney habíamos visto ya algún acercamiento hacia México con los Tres Caballeros, por ejemplo, en los 40s, pero en esta ocasión, ¿qué tan difícil fue tomar la decisión de reflejar un aspecto tan importante en México, sobre todo en un momento como este? Y la segunda pregunta sería, ¿qué tan difícil fue también el proceso de selección de las voces, porque tienen un elenco increíble, tanto en inglés como en español? ¿Cómo lo eligieron y si fue complicado?
One of the joys for me of making films at Pixar has always been working with the amazing actors that we've got to work with on all the films. When we began making COCO, we all agreed together that it was vital that we hire an entirely Latino cast for the film. And so we worked with our own casting directors, as well as a casting director that specializes in casting Latino projects, to work with us to find all the amazing people that we found for the English language cast. Amazing people like Benjamin Pratt and Edward James Olmos, and of course Gael Garcia Bernal, who also is, of course, in the Spanish language version. And the most important person that we needed to find was a boy to play Miguel. And we saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boys all over the United States and in Mexico before we finally found Anthony Gonzalez, who plays Miguel in the English language version. Everyone had an amazing time recording the dialogue for the film, and they were all equally passionate and proud to be a part of a project like this. When it came time to do the Spanish dub of the film, we've always relied on our partners around the world at Disney to help us with the dubbing, because of course we don't speak the 47 or odd languages that we translate our films into. But we knew that Mexico, of course, was going to be one of the most important ones to get right. And the team down here was so proud of the film and wanted to get it right, and they did an amazing job pulling together this unprecedented cast to voice this version of the film. We've all seen the Spanish language version. We love it. They did an amazing job. Everyone, every last person, Marco Antonio Solis, Luis Angel, who plays Miguel, is incredible. He's just as good as Anthony. We're very proud of how perfectly the film is cast and how perfectly it plays in Spanish.
Oh, to the first part of the question.
Started the film 6 years ago.
Yeah, you know, like we said, all of our hearts were attuned to making this film represent the experiences that we had in Mexico. For me, the experiences that I've had growing up with my family. And what that meant was creating characters who were real and families that are messy and have struggles, but ultimately I think it's within the spirit of you know, so much of what I know of the Mexican culture that we rally together and we're there for each other. And you know, at every step of the way, it wasn't difficult in the sense that we all agreed that we need to do justice by the experiences that we've had, and that means to create the most well-rounded and the most you know, interesting, intricate family and story that we could create, because it's an interesting and intricate culture. But it did mean that we needed to ask a lot of questions and depend on you know, expert opinions, expert Mexican and Latino opinions about music, about you know, the technical aspects of the celebration, of the dancing, of the history of cinema. And so, but we like that. At Pixar, we really like the research. We're kind of nerds in the sense that we're super nerds in the sense that that we want the film to have all of those references and have all that specificity, because that's what makes it rich and interesting, and that's what helps us learn. We're students for life, and we don't want to shut our minds off to the possibilities and the things that actually exist. We want to know all of that stuff. We want to grow with each film, and so even though it takes a lot of work, I think it's definitely worth it.
We have 2 more questions, but before leaving, or before the 2 questions, we have a very nice surprise, because Luis Angel, who is Miguel voice in COCO movie Spanish version, is here. He's arriving from Panama, and he will be joining us for two questions for him. So a big applause to Luis Angel.
Sí, Amigo del teléfono, ¿puedes bajar? Miguel.
Muchas gracias por recibirme con los brazos abiertos.
Bueno, vamos a hacerle un par de preguntas. Está llegando ahorita de Guanajuato, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Entonces vamos a hacerle solamente un par de preguntillas, por favor. Alguien que...
Teléfonos.
¿Verdad? Andrés, bienvenido. Bueno, primero quisiera preguntarle a Luis, pues, ¿cuál fue su experiencia al personificar a un niño de la cultura mexicana en una tradición tan importante como Día de Muertos? Y al resto del equipo de producción que nos acompaña, ¿cuál fue el reto tecnológico más importante al que se enfrentaron a hacer esta animación con tantos detalles para la cultura mexicana? Gracias, José Luis Adriano de Reforma.
¿Para quién es la pregunta?
Para mí, José Luis Adriano de Reforma.
¿Pero para quién? ¿Para el niño?
Primero para Luis, pues cuál fue su experiencia al grabar esta voz.
Bueno, entonces empezamos. ¿Cuál fue tu experiencia, Luis?
No, pues me siento muy emocionado de que es la primera película de Disney Pixar mexicana y que nos hayan tomado en cuenta de nuestras tradiciones tan hermosas como es el Día de Muertos.
Venga, tú.
¿Y la segunda parte?
La segunda parte es dirigida al equipo de producción. ¿Cuál fue su reto tecnológico más importante al que se enfrentaron al hacer la animación con tantos detalles para esta película?
This was a huge movie. It was huge in scope. It's a big journey. We had to, as we always do in computer animation, we had to create the entire world that you see on screen, including the Land of the Dead that we had to imagine and create. And it took an army of artists in the studio and technical people to figure out how to do that. We then had to populate that world with thousands and thousands of skeletons. We had never animated skeletons before, and we had to dress those skeletons. There wasn't any one particular challenge that was that challenging. It was the scope of the entire film. There was so much detail, so many little nuances, so many things that we wanted to put on the screen, and that. Luckily, we worked with a lot of very talented people at the studio who were up to the challenge. They especially loved working on this film because we did a lot of things that we had never done before at the studio, like creating the skeletons that could fall apart and have to pull themselves back together. Just an enormous number of details. So there wasn't any one challenge like creating water or creating fur. It was really the sum total of a lot of different things and the scope of this film that made it difficult.
Gracias. Vamos a tener dos preguntas más, por favor.
El personaje de la primera película basada en tradiciones tan únicas de México. Entonces, ¿cómo se siente saber que es el doblaje de Miguel? Pues muy emocionado porque toda la gente que conozco está muy emocionada de ver esta película, ya que es una película muy importante y sí, sí les va a gustar, les va a encantar esta película, está hermosa.
¿Podrías echar un grito poco loco?
He's an amazing singer too. He's an amazing actor and amazing singer.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Jesus González para YouTube. Soy un gran fanático de las películas de Pixar aquí en México. Tengo mi playa de Toy Story. Bueno, también soy actor de doblaje, no estuve en COCO, pero la pregunta va para Luis Ángel. Quería saber cómo fue para ti trabajar, creo que fue Tejero quien dirigió la parte hablada, creo que fue, no estoy seguro quién, Jack Jackson, creo que dirigió la parte musical. ¿Cómo fue trabajar en la parte musical? Y hiciste un excelente trabajo, entonces yo quería saber si en algún momento tú has considerado seguir trabajando en doblaje después del proyecto de COCO.
Sí, pues me encantaría que me invitaran a doblajes de voz. Sí, gracias a la paciencia de los productores salió todo muy bien, perfectamente yo digo. Y sí, gracias a su paciencia y dedicación salió todo a la perfección.
Muy bien. Bueno.
Can I ask a question? How long have you been singing?
¿Cuánto llevas cantando?
Llevo como 4 años, empecé desde los 6 años a cantar. Llevo creo que 4.
Muy bien, pues muchísimas gracias a todos nuestros amigos de la prensa, a todos nuestros amigos de los medios, a todos nuestros amigos compañeros
Sí está padre la luz. Para que tengas una buena gama. To the front, please. To the front. To the front, please. Lo bueno que no dominan bien los pies, eso es lo que me gusta.
Gracias.
Acá enfrente, Luis, por favor. Luis, una más. Mira para acá, Luis.
Luis, acá se Luis, una más acá, por favor. Saludos. Luis, por acá. Acá de este lado. Al frente, por favor.
Hola para acá, Luis, por favor, para acá. Gracias.
Luis.